Susan Powell had a problem at her home in Utah. The legal record eventually concluded she would never return. No one has ever found her. Most missing person cases begin with a disappearance. This one began months earlier. Months before she disappeared, she began preparing for an investigation. She preserved documents. She preserved videos. If anything happened to her, look closely at her inner circle. I am one of the records she left behind. She continued sharing a home with the man she wanted investigators to examine. Why would someone document their own fears yet continue to live right beside the source of them?
Subscribe, like, and turn on notifications.
Susan disappeared without leaving an explanation. The records did. She discussed her concerns with people she trusted. Her writings pointed directly to the struggles within her marriage, placing a heavy focus on her spouse. The concerns did not trigger immediate action. Then December arrived. On the day before she disappeared, nothing appeared dramatically different. She attended church services. She spoke with family members. No emergency was reported. Then Susan disappeared. Her purse remained, her phone remained, her car remained. There was no sign that she had planned a trip. The person missing was her. Her children remained. Records later confirmed that her husband Josh was the last adult to see her before she vanished. Meanwhile, her previous warnings hung heavily over the investigation. The search began when she failed to appear for work. Family members could not reach her. Concern quickly turned into a missing person investigation. The first question was obvious. Where was Susan? The second question arrived immediately after. Why had she left instructions for investigators before she disappeared? Her husband Josh provided an explanation. He stated that he had taken his 2 young sons on a camping trip during the night. At first, the explanation seemed unusual. Families take spontaneous trips. He simply chose an unconventional activity. Then the details begin to accumulate. The trip allegedly began shortly after midnight. Outside temperatures had fallen below freezing. The destination was Simpson Springs. It was a remote area, far from home. He stated that they slept in the vehicle. The boys were very young, questioned why such a trip had begun after midnight in freezing weather. Then investigators found signs that daily life inside the house may not have continued normally. A box fan had been pointed toward a specific area of the home. Some bedding could not be accounted for. Investigators also noted signs that parts of the home had recently been cleaned. Investigators later searched the area repeatedly. Search teams examined campsites, desert terrain, and abandoned mine areas connected to locations along Josh's reported route. She was never found there. The farther investigators examined the timeline, the more questions appeared. The weather made the trip harder to explain. The timing drew even more attention. His phone activity stopped during part of the period investigators examined most closely. Investigators continued comparing phone records, vehicle, and witness statements. They continued inside the vehicle itself. They examined the mileage on Josh's minivan. Investigators noted that the recorded distance did not fully match the stated travel route. Odometers have an inconvenient habit. They usually remember trips better than people do. Road conditions were poor. Drivers make wrong turns. Travel estimates are imperfect. But this unexplained mileage was logged on the very night she disappeared. Josh claimed to be camping that night. Investigators would spend years examining that same period. The discrepancy did not prove what happened. Years later, investigators would focus on a statement from one of the boys. According to investigative records, one boy later stated that his mother came with them and stayed where they went. Josh had already told investigators that she never joined the trip. Over time, investigators noted inconsistencies in portions of his statements. The timeline did not always remain exactly the same. Yet none of them immediately proved that she had been with them that night, or that his account was false. What weakened the explanation was not the camping trip itself. It was the timing. Months earlier, she had already begun documenting her concerns. She had taken steps to make sure they would be found. The camping trip and the preparations now occupied the same timeline. One event could have been dismissed. Together, they became harder to ignore. The farther the investigation moved forward, the more investigators returned to the months before Susan disappeared. Every question about that night increased the importance of everything she had done before it. Investigators also continued returning to statements made by the children. This was not because the statements were clear, but because they were among the few accounts connected to that night. Again and again, investigators returned to Josh. Many of the unanswered questions centered on his actions that night. Susan recorded a video inside the family home. A copy of that recording would eventually become part of the records she preserved. She recorded that a recent increase in life insurance coverage troubled her. She spoke about money. The concern was not how much money existed. The concern was that she often could not access it without Josh knowing. He controlled access to the family's bank accounts. He reviewed purchases and questioned spending. The financial conflicts seemed serious. Financial disputes are common. Preparing investigators for a future disappearance is not. She did not only talk about problems, kept records of them, placed personal documents inside a safe deposit box. She also preserved a video record and left written instructions. They described what should happen if she disappeared. Financial disputes can generate paperwork. Preparing investigators for a future disappearance is something else entirely. She left records in several places. I was present when she handled paperwork. Over time, preparing documents became part of the routine. Some records were placed inside a safe deposit box. Others remained inside the home or with people she trusted. She spread them across several places. One copy can disappear. Several copies become much harder to ignore. Perhaps she was preparing for a divorce or a custody dispute. Documentation often appears before a legal separation. Collecting records before a divorce or custody dispute is not unusual. But the documents were not waiting for a lawyer. They appeared to be waiting for investigators, and yet the timeline refuses to cooperate. Yet before she disappeared, she remained with Josh. The marriage continued. Daily life appeared largely unchanged from the outside. The records became more detailed. The preparations continued. Yet she remained in the same house. Perhaps she believed there was still time. People postpone difficult decisions every day. The records suggest she postponed only one. Time to organize documents. Time to make plans. Time to leave. Then Susan disappeared. As the investigation continued, attention expanded beyond Josh Powell. Another name began appearing in the records. Susan Powell, Josh's father. At first, the development seemed unrelated. It is rarely a good sign when an investigation introduces another Powell instead of another answer. The disappearance appeared to begin and end inside the marriage. Then investigators recovered a massive volume of additional material from Susan Powell, including personal writings, photographs, and digital records. A significant portion of this media focused strictly on her, consisting of documented moments compiled over time. These journals revealed a deep, long-term focus on her, suggesting years of close attention that extended far beyond a casual family dynamic. Investigators examined Stephen's records. They examined the material recovered from his home. Yet none of it explained where she was. She remained missing. She may not have been dealing with a single difficult relationship. The records suggested pressure from several directions at once. The investigation continued for years. Investigators continued following leads after he moved to Washington State. Susan was still missing. No one could explain where she had gone. Josh remained the central focus of the investigation. Prosecutors never filed charges in Susan's disappearance, but they never announced another person at the center of the case. Attention gradually shifted toward the welfare of her two sons. The boys were living with her parents. He continued seeking time with them. Her family argued that the risk had not disappeared. The dispute continued for years. Then a supervised visit was approved. On the day of the scheduled visit, the investigation reached an unexpected turning point.
And were you calling about the fire in the 8200 block of 188th Street, Courtney?
Investigators continued reviewing the available records. Josh Powell was no longer available for further interviews. From that point forward, the investigation into her disappearance continued, without the person investigators had questioned most closely. Years later, Susan Powell was declared legally dead. The active investigation ended without any charges ever being filed in her disappearance. She has never been found. Most people return to the same parts of this story: the camping trip, the investigation, and the years of searching. I return to the records she left behind. She preserved me before she disappeared. The videos, documents, and instructions all survived. She prepared for investigators before investigators knew a crime might exist. I still have no record, explaining why so many warnings changed so little. Don't miss out on the next content. Subscribe, like, and turn on notifications.